Greetings. On your screen is part of the Greek text of Revelation 1:14, the 14th verse of the first chapter of the book of Revelation, the last book of the Christian Bible. And this is the portion in which Christ's hair is likened to wool and snow. And this text is open to two possible interpretations. And the difference between those views centers on this word here, leukon, which means white. It could be understood as an adjective modifying the word which precedes it, or as part of a separate thought together with the two words that follow it. In short, this text can be broken into two thoughts, and that specific word can fall in either the first thought or the second thought. Now, to illustrate what I mean, I'll divide the text up with different color coding. One way to understand the text is like this, where the first three words, leukai os erion, white like wool, is one thought, and then the next three words, leukon os chion, white like snow, forms a second thought. The translation in the King James Version reflects this interpretation of the text. However, the text could alternatively be understood this way, where the first four words, leukai os erion leukon, are a single thought, meaning white like white wool, and then the other two words simply mean like snow. In this reading, the word which was underlined a moment ago is part of the first thought. The second use of the word white is an adjective modifying the word wool. This was the interpretation taken by the Geneva Bible and also by the Douay Rheims translation, and the latter shouldn't be surprising, as it was also the interpretation taken by the ancient Latin Vulgate. And today, the ESV, the NASB, and the NRSV side with this second interpretation as well. And with all that in mind, I would now like to turn to the ancient Ge'ez translation of that verse, which you now see on your screen. Or more specifically, this is the portion of the verse describing his head and his hairs. This actually doesn't include the part of the verse which likens his eyes to fire. But that aside, the question I want to explore in this video is this. Which of the two interpretations which we just looked at does the ancient Ge'ez translation of this verse side with? So in this video, I'm going to go through the different elements of this text just so that any interested viewer who might not be familiar with Ge'ez can nonetheless be fully familiar with this text. And along the way, I might also mention some corresponding terms in other languages. So jumping right in, we begin with the conjunction, which is the standard conjunction across the Semitic languages, meaning and I highlighted this one in red, and I'll be highlighting all the conjunctions in this text as we go through this text, as precisely where the conjunctions are found will be relevant to the question of which of the two interpretations is settled on by this particular translation. And then after that, after the conjunction, we have the word wa'țዐda, which means white. Then the second word is re'esu, meaning his head. And this word, re'es, corresponds to the Hebrew word rosh and the Arabic word ras. And it's also the ancestor of the Amharic word ras, although that's spelled now, as if I understand correctly, it's written without the aleph. But whatever the case, the Amharic word ras is what you get in, it forms part of the phrase or the title ras teferi. But that aside, if I can share a quick and, in my opinion, interesting side note, as is noted in different works on Ge'ez grammar, this construction, re'esu, his head, is often used to mean more broadly his self or himself. I mention that because I wonder if the translator understood this as being limited to just Christ's head or something more beyond that, perhaps to his entire physical self. It's an interesting question, as I think there are some obvious parallels or at least some obvious overlap between the description of Christ in Revelation 1:14 and the description of Noah in the Ge'ez translation or the Ge'ez text of the 106th chapter of the book of Enoch. And that's a topic I might explore in a future video. But anyway, moving on from that, we then get another conjunction, meaning and. And then we get the word wa'ዕይንቲሁ, meaning his hairs. And this word, she'irt, is directly related to the biblical Hebrew word se'ar, which means hair. For example, in Genesis 25:25, when Esau is described as ke'aderet se'ar, like a garment of hair, it uses that Hebrew term. And these two terms, the first three letters are basically the same. It's basically shin or sin, and then ayin, and then resh, right? Then we get to the word kama, which means like or like as. right? It's for comparisons, and it corresponds to the Hebrew kemo and the Arabic kama, and ironically, the Spanish como is similar to these Semitic terms, but that similarity in sound and meaning is merely coincidental, as the Spanish term descends from the Latin quomodo, but that too is a discussion for another time. Now, I marked this construction, kama, in blue because the location of this construction, like the location of the conjunctions, the word we or and, the location of these terms is also relevant to the question of the interpretation of this text. And so moving on from that, we get the word tsemer, which means wool. And others might want to argue it's pronounced demer, like the Arabic dad. But either way, this word means wool. And the word that follows is again the word tsa'ada, which means, as was noted earlier, it means white. So these two words together, tsemer tsa'ada, can be understood as meaning white wool. But that raises the question, is that how the translator intended it? Well, that question gets answered in the text that follows on the third line, which is wakama bared, and like snow. See, it's the conjunction which is significant here. That conjunction separates this thought on the third line from the thought on the second line. Now, admittedly, a corresponding conjunction does not appear in that location in the Greek text, but it nonetheless captures the ancient translator's understanding of that text, which is to say, the use of the conjunction here in the Ge'ez text conveys how the translator understood the Greek text. And by prefixing a conjunction to the second use of kama, the translator separated it from the word which precedes it, right? Which is tsa'ada, meaning white, thus establishing that word as an adjective modifying the word for wool, which again is tsemer. So a hyper-literal reading of this Ge'ez translation would be, and white his head and his hair, like white wool, and like snow. Now, some might feel this was a bit of a slow walk through the text to get to the answer of the question which I posed at the beginning, but that nonetheless is the answer. The ancient Ge'ez translation unambiguously sides with the view that the text was stating that Christ's head and hairs were white like white wool, and in addition to that, it was also like snow. So the second use of the word white is being employed as an adjective modifying the word wool. And with that, I'll close here. As always, I look forward to any comments, questions, or even criticisms that others may have, so feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. I don't censor anyone here. And as always, I close by saying, God bless.